say you shouldn't have an opinion. I said the immediate reaction, the instinctual thing to do is the fight or flight type thing, where you'd want to say that. But then I said, if you'd listened, that you're Canadian, so you should have an opinion.
So yeah, if Buck Birch is absolutely, if he's a Canadian, he has just as much rights to vote and have his opinion politically as anyone else. I stand behind that.
And I think that there's good value in listening to non-Canadians talk about Canada, because it gives us information about how we sit in the world.
Yeah. If he is out of Canada and he is voting, that is thanks to Justin Trudeau, because Stephen Harper was trying to remove that from expats. Pierre
succeeded. That bill got royal assent because, I thought it had been overturned by the Supreme Court, but it was on its way back up through this, the court system being challenged by 2 expats in the U.S. And Donald Sutherland got a hold of it, and he was pissed. And so did the other expats, but it was 1 million expats that he actually successfully took their voting rights away. And then the legislation was being challenged. It was on its way to the Supreme Court. And then the first things the Liberals did was they pulled that legislation.
Ouroboros of old joined. Hi, how are you? I've had some great conversation with him. He says, why does money mean amplifying your voice?
It shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't.
It shouldn't be. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You're still just a voice. And that's, I would like to see money out of politics. No more lobbyists, no more corporate donations to parties. I think that needs to end.
Can you imagine if every politician who gets voted in immediately gets the average Canadian income? That's all you're going to get while you serve, because it is a service to the public to be in government.
Well, and this ludicrous business of you have to have $250,000 just to run for the leadership of a party, like who's going to do that? The people
that's internal.
Well, that's also like I always think like we need a party that's
more
right or more left than the NDP. But then you start looking at how do you start a party, and it's insane.
Yeah.
It's completely insurmountable. You're not going to get the Canadian Socialist Party off the ground unless you have several $1 billion.
Yeah, we need a citation on that, Buck Birch.
Yeah.
Gonna need a citation on that.
Hashtag citation needed. That's
hundreds of millions. Yeah, no, it's not. He's just parroting propaganda. I looked it up.
Sure.
I mean, he's got millions, yes, but that's a lot of inheritance and stuff from his family.
Yeah.
Like his grandfather used to own a chain of gas stations once upon a time, way back in the day.
That'd still be good money these days.
Oh, whoever gave me the stars, thank you. Appreciate
you're right on the you're right.
I was going to ask James, have you had any luck getting through to people on with any particular techniques?
Sorry, J-Dub. No, actually, because I'm very how would you put it? I'm not going to say corrosive, aggressive, abrasive.
Direct?
I'm very
You're
abrasive and direct.
But have you not had any, so I'm going to say this. I'm just going to, you know me, I just blurt stuff out. I don't mean to be offensive. But you're like a blue-collar working guy. Do you find it easier to connect with other blue-collar working guys? Because like some of them look at me and I'm a girl, even though I work in construction, and they're like, shut up, what do you know? I think it takes all kinds of Canadians who look like all kinds of other Canadians to have these conversations. Have you found that helpful?
I'm actually surprised with, let's say, just the people I work with, how many actual progressive blue collar workers there are. There are some that are conservative. They're diehard conservative, and they say some pretty vile stuff. But there is also a lot of progressive blue collar workers out there. And I think it helps. Like, we don't talk about politics at work very often.
Well, no, that's
because it can get a little heated.
Well, you know,
we've had some heated conversations.
Are you unionized where you are?
Yes, I am.
Do you think that helps? Like, to have conversations politically, to be in a union? Do you see more people who understand the power of that solidarity?
No, I think there's guys that don't find value in. Well, here's the problem: is that the company I work for was originally bought out a couple of years ago by a much larger construction company. And when the larger construction company took over, they unionized, and automatically all the guys working there had to take $1 loss in pay per hour plus pay union dues on top of that. So there was a lot of
shitty.
There was a lot of hurt feelings over that when it.
And that
But
seems
how
like
much did they gain in benefits?
I don't think we gained that much because honestly, we're still using we're using merit. I'm not sure if you're familiar with merit construction benefits. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're not using the union benefits. We're using merit benefits while underneath this union. And there's
a lot of corruption everywhere.
Can I ask what company?
No, I actually don't talk about the company. I can tell you what union we have. We use CLAC, C-L-A-C.
Oh, well, they're not a union.
Well, they're a company's union, yeah.
Sorry.
No.
I'm not a big fan of CLAC.
My dad is a lifetime member of the Operating Engineers Union out here in BC. He actually showed me his watch. He's retired now, but yeah, we were a union family.
I've never been in or worked with a union for any reason, but
yeah,
I would have thought that they might have understood more the importance of the power of the people when they work together in solidarity.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of union busting that happened out here in the West.
There's lots of
in the 80s
PR that's
90s.
real bad about it too. Like we can just see it rolling by in the comments. Unions are all corrupt. Unions are this. Unions are that.
Well, there was politicians out here who actively made it their mission to disband unions, and they started in the 70s. The first part of the 70s. Just before the 80s, they really bared down and they started going after all unions in BC. They went after the teachers union. They went after the construction unions. They went after the grocery, because we used to have grocery worker unions out here. They went on a spree of busting unions out here, and wages fell, condos became worthless. It was bad. It was really bad.
So I am a job steward for the union here. And I got to sit in on the arbitration for our collective agreement. And I can tell you, like J-Dub said, CLAC isn't that particular union with how big they are. They're more the pro-business than they are pro-worker. And that I find is a bit of a problem. When we brought up things that workers wanted to see, what we'd like to have. Oh boy, listening to our union rep talk to the guys from the company I work with, it was painful. They did not. We didn't get half of what we wanted, and it was painful. CLAC, you're right, Carrie. CLAC is more pro corporate than.
Well, and I mean, Michael has said in the comments that they've become corrupted, but he's correct. Many of the things that all workers benefit from, having weekends, getting overtime pay, getting benefits, having only 6 or 7 days, not working next to a 5-year-old. That's all unions. But
look at how many other toxic workplaces there are and corruption there is just outside of the union industry.
That's an old talking point, though, that people from the outside will just say, well, they're all corrupt, but they don't actually know, right?
Yeah. And that's part of the union busting propaganda.
My best friend is a nurse in BC, but she was in Alberta, and now nursing unions, they seem pretty powerful and are effective, especially in supporting their membership if they come into problems with, like my best friend, she's now on disability. She had a blood in the face, complete CPTSD, got blood squirted in her face. The person has active AIDS and the whole thing, and now she's on disability and she has super PTSD. And it's like her union is what made sure that she is taken care of and advocated for, and helps her find a job that meets the parameters so she can get back to work. But alone, she could never negotiate that stuff.
No.
And they're like, I find I'm in the building trades, like I belong to the carpenters union, and I mean, my local, it to me is fantastic because they realize that they have a symbiotic relationship with the employer. It's not all one-sided. They fight for their members. They fight for what exists inside of the agreement, but out, like I've seen guys get laid off or fired with cause, and they go to the union hall complaining, and then the union hall will investigate and find out, and they'll be like, well, you're an idiot. What did you expect, right? But I've seen guys get fired and they shouldn't have, and the union investigated and said, no, this isn't happening. You're going to take them back or you're going to pay them. So you have to have a relationship, right? Because the union can't exist without the employers. If there's no jobs through employers, they can't exist. And the employer needs that workforce to do the job so they can make money. And you know, I know some people say, well, it doesn't have to be unionized, which it doesn't, but it makes their life a whole lot easier. In Ontario, unionized building trades are proven to be more profitable than their non-union counterparts.
James and I are starting a new business on the side here. We're going to do a co-op construction. And have I got a deal for you? I've been looking at, because I'm looking at land planning all the time, I'm looking at the Liberals' housing plan and this idea of like cookie cutter houses, which doesn't go far enough. I think that they missed the key part of that, or how it worked the first time with the Victory homes was they were built by a crown corporation. I don't know why they skipped over that part, but this idea of like pre-approved, easy to get through any municipality housing coupled with CMHC affordable housing. And I'm just like, there's got to be an opportunity here. If you are not like super crazy greedy, you could be banging these out and building them and making affordable housing and still making a living off of doing it. You're just not going to be making billions.
What I want to know is what they think affordable is, because we know all the buzzwords in BC, and they have been feeding us a sloppy serving of affordability housing, and that's 70% of the average paycheck that's in the city. So they use all the buzzwords, right? They use affordable and non-market or market rates, and it's like,
I'm not totally sure in BC, but I know I was talking to some housing advocates here at the affordable housing open house for the city of Calgary, and the city of Calgary specifically, they say it's 80% of market value is affordable. And then deeply affordable, which would be for like poverty level, is 40% of the market value.
And
you know what I think is happening?
What's that?
Is that all governments are terrified, right? I think politics, what is happening is if they go the extra step and build houses that are cheaper than what market value is now, there's millions of people that have mortgages that are going to be on the hook for equity that isn't there anymore. And our bank's going to start calling in those mortgages, right? They can actually create a recession by lowering the prices because all of a sudden...
you know what?
Will is there to fix the housing problem in Canada.
But you know what's the real problem?
They're screwed if they do, because if they broke the market, right, by doing that, and you had millions of people lose their houses and lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, how are they going to explain that? So I think they're between a rock and a hard place, to be honest. Capitalism has created this insane problem with the housing. They've let it. In Harper's times, when the U.S. market crashed, Harper, was it with the Bank of Canada or with the CMHC? Somehow he manipulated it to ensure that we didn't, and people went, ooh, our market.
But then it just kept going.
But
he was asked.
We'd be in a better place if we'd had the correction earlier.
He was asked 4 years later. 4 years later, he was asked about the housing bubble, and he stood there and he looked at that guy in the face and said, Canada doesn't have a housing bubble. But anyways,
we've been living on that bubble since the Harper.
If we had that correction then, we would be in a better place now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we need a correction, because you can't have 12 times income being the base for buying a house. It's eventually it's going to crash itself, and it's going to be a lot harder on people than if we had let it take its natural course.
The housing crisis is not on Trudeau. The housing crisis goes way back. So and it was the Conservatives before Trudeau that cut all of the housing programming and planning.
The problem in BC here is that because we were the beginning part of the housing crisis right after the Olympics in 2010. Some could argue it goes back to Expo 86, but we were the canary in the coal mine. I call us the canary in the coal mine because we had the housing issues before the rest of Canada did. And what the problem with that, though, is that the equity that's been gathered in family homes that have been bought, that were bought like in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, is that the equity in their houses have gone off the charts because now there's no houses in this area that are under $1 million. And most of them back in the 70s and 80s were 250,000, 300,000, right? So they really have made out like bandits in the equity that they've gained in their home through no effort on their part.
Until they try and sell it when everybody else tries to sell it.
Right.
They're fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
they're gonna crash it. All the boomers trying to sell their homes and all of their descendants who inherit them trying to sell them all at once is going to be a corrective as it is.
Well, I don't know any millennials or Gen Xers or Gen Zs that are going to be able to afford the $7.2 million home that's kitty corner sitting on a city lot from me. It's got just average finishes in it. It's a craftsman style home. It's got some nice fancy lights on it, but it's $7.2 million.
Who the fuck buys that?
Somebody from mainland China.
Well, it can't be an investment.
It was.
And,
there's. That's why they're trying to sell it.
No. I mean, it can't be an average Canadian.
No, it's not.
I think the one thing that could save them a little bit is, and I think we talked about this before, politics and planning, is if they started to build reasonable houses, like I don't know about where you are, but where I am in Ontario, all the houses are just getting bigger and bigger, more elaborate. Higher end finishes. Like if they started building basically wartime homes, like a place to live, 800, 1,000 square feet, a starter home with just bare bones basic finishes.
That's what the Liberal housing plan for the cookie cutter pre-approved houses are. What I'm shocked by is the claims that it's like 2 years to get a development permit through in some cities. I'm like, certainly not here or any of the ones that I have done. I've done entire like neighborhood concept plans in a year for an entire quarter section. I don't know what is going on in other provinces other than BC, and we can get a development like the land rezoning is 6 months to upzone the land for density, and then we've got 3 months for a development permit, and then 3 weeks for a building permit. That's pretty.
Don't get me started on housing in Vancouver.
In Ontario, they say 8 years in some areas. From the time you purchased the land, right?
Okay, well, I mean,
this is part of what
rezoning on a huge piece of land.
This is part of what the Liberals' plan is to force the municipalities to change their ways in doing this, right? To speed up the process because they can't get shovels in the ground. Like if you bought a piece of land now, say I want to build a condo, and it takes you 8 years from the point of purchase to the time you've built it, that's nuts because it only takes.
And I don't know what they're doing in that. That doesn't make, I mean, it's literally what I do for a living is make these applications. I have never seen anything like that kind of timeline.
No.
Like, what are they doing?
Well, in Vancouver here, a lot of developers snapped up lots and then they threw community gardens on them because the city of Vancouver, who loves developers, told them they wouldn't have to pay any property taxes on their piece of land and they could sit on it indefinitely until they were ready to build.
Because that's the current use of it. You pay taxes on your current use. Yes.
So they throw in a bit of pebbles and a tree in the corner and maybe a bench. And they don't have to pay any taxes. Meanwhile, businesses are shutting down because they've raised the property taxes so high in the residential and the
and every time they do that, they're eroding the population that supports the local business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But it'll be interesting to see what they view as affordable housing around these government houses that they're planning to build.
Well, and like, it's going to be about size.
Yeah.
It has to be because like the only way to save on a house is to make them smaller. Like when we talk about affordable units in multifamily right now, it's because they're smaller units. And it's pretty set. Like I'm doing multifamily right now for about, not land out, $250 to $300 a square foot. So every square foot you could take off is $300 worth of cost gone.
Yeah.
I mean, to a point, because you still have to pay for a kitchen and you have to still pay for the HVAC systems and everything. That's kind of set investment. But, you know, it's like, why do they make 5-bedroom homes? Because those 2 extra bedrooms are just pure profit per square foot. Yeah.
Well, see, and what we ran into in Vancouver here, a lot of the problem is people tore down old homes and then just built single family homes on the same lot. Yeah. And so it didn't add any units available to the community, right? It didn't put anything on the market. And now that EB's come through and he's rezoned the entire province, he's overridden municipalities and he's just rezoned the entire province. In the areas that need it, like the different cities that need it.
You know what, though? We're only going to see about 10% uptake on those lots that have been released into that zoning for developers to build on them.
Yeah.
It's not going to, like, people panic. Calgary's currently talking about removing their single family home zoning so that everything can have at least 8 total units on it. People are losing their minds. And I was like, even if they did that tomorrow, you'd only see 10% of lots do that.
Right.
Buck Birch made a point that was not yelling at us about something that I was going to comment on. Oh, the wartime homes, the Victory homes are about 800 square feet. They're all across Canada. And Buck Birch, they were the secret in that sauce of why that was so effective at the time was post-wartime. They were trying to house soldiers and families coming back. And to do that, it was a Crown corporation that was created. And the Crown was the builder. Yeah. And so they're using the same idea of cookie cutter homes that they can slap together quickly while skipping over that the part that I think actually made it work was that they formed a Crown corporation to actually have economy of scale and bang them out. But we need all over Canada.
Yeah, I'm full on for Crown corporations. Bring them back. We should have we should have all of our basic 100%. All of our basic living needs should have a Crown corporation, a Crown cell phone, a cell company, communications company, a Crown grocery store, a Crown gas station, bring back Petro-Canada, a Crown.
They used to work. They used to work. It was the Conservatives who sold them all off.
I know.
Because they wanted private companies to own them and turn a profit.
Yeah.
They used to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I make this point all the time. Living in Canada was at its best in the 70s, which is when capitalism was its weakest and we were more of a socialist democracy in the 70s.
And the boomers made all their money, right?
Yeah.
Right? All the wealth got sucked up in that period.
The
corporations realized, holy shit, we can keep all this ourselves.
Yeah.
And started doing all these things, union busting, whatever.
Yeah.
To change it, lobbying governments. You don't need Crown corporations. We can run that for you. Like,
yeah. My dad in the 70s.
Alberta's a fantastic example of that. I'm sorry. I keep
No, go ahead, James. I've talked
Alberta's
a
great example of what happened to all the Crown corporations, right? Alberta government telephones, power, etc., liquor stores, insurance. Everything was all run through the government. And then the Conservatives started selling all the stuff off and prices started going through the roof.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, just because it's Crown doesn't mean it's going to be less effective or worse.
No.
Like that.
Well, that's a common talking point, isn't it? Yeah. The government charges too much and it's going to cost more for the government and they're all slackers. And I'm like, I don't know. I've seen them do some good things.
You know, case in point, all you have to do is look at BC Ferries. Now, some of you may not be familiar with it, but any of my folks in the comments here that rely on BC Ferries at all will know what I'm talking about. But there's an example of a Crown corporation that was privatized and has gone to shit and has never recovered. They have so many problems with BC Ferries. There are people like my parents live up on the Sunshine Coast. And so their connection to Vancouver and all the doctors and everything requires a ferry ride, 30-minute ferry ride, because they don't have those services up on the Sunshine Coast. My mom is having to come down for a biopsy for cancer at UBC Hospital. She says, I can't even get a pink card, like to ride, to make sure she gets a spot on the ferry. I can't even get a pink slip to make sure for medical emergencies I get on the ferry to get down to UBC because it's too late now. She says people who live up on the Sunshine Coast cannot get off the Sunshine Coast on the ferry because they don't run enough ferries and they've charged too much money and they won't fix it, but it's part of our highways.
Yeah.
But it was privatized, but it was privatized. It was sold off. And so it's this, so the government has limited control over what they can do, even though it's their main highway from the Sunshine Coast. Yeah, Ruby Lake does rock. Vac's still here. Yeah.
So there's a reason why stuff like cell phone service is cheaper in Saskatchewan, even through the larger companies like Rogers, is because there's a crown corporation here still running cell phone service, and it's helping keep those prices down. I pay far less for my Rogers phone here in Saskatchewan than I did in Alberta.
Yeah.
Far less.
I don't want to hear about it, James.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about it.
You don't have to pay shareholders, right? There's no
Poor
dividends
James.
at the end
You're
of the
just getting
year.
the shit out of the stick here. We are talking over you.
You guys
We're
keep
disagreeing.
poor J-Dub keeps getting interrupted.
Sorry, man.
You got girls in here. That's the problem. Once the girls start talking, good luck.
That's why when I want to talk, I will just interrupt and keep talking.
Yeah.
You do that.
Right? I'm not trying to be rude. It's just
No, absolutely.
You're the host. You're allowed to do that for sure.
I have
one of
trouble
those
navigating these lives myself, like waiting my turn and waiting for and trying to get in on the point. And
It's probably the same as like when you sit for coffee with a bunch of intelligent people. It just goes haywire all over. And then you're having side conversations and starting new businesses with James.
yeah.
they should make the app so when your little square turns blue because you're talking, they should have a timer that shows you how long you've been talking for. Because it would make you conscious of how the conversation is going, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I have to bitch for like 1 minute here.
Yeah.
I had a picture up. You know the picture of the like scooped out South America and scooped out Africa?
That
and
was an amazing picture.
I got a community violation for that.
No.
Picture. And then I appealed it, and they didn't take the appeal. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
No way.
I'm so pissed. I'm just like, that was just a picture. And I just had a couple hashtags underneath about colonialism and exceptionalism. And that was it. And I got a community violation.
Man.
and like a demerit point. However those work. I don't know. I haven't been getting any lately. I'm doing pretty good, I guess.
People like to report my comments.
Oh, I bet.
I get my comments reported. Some of them are like there's ones where you're like honest, like it's like, yeah, I deserve
the vomit
that.
emoji, you get reported for it. I'm like,
I called somebody a twat waffle.
atta girl. I'm sure they
And then I got the community violation almost immediately, and I was like, yeah, that I deserved. I did deserve that.
Are we talking about the CBC now?
Well, they're saying that Crown corporations, their CEOs get paid too much. So I'm asking how much? Because
how much?
they must be in the report today where the CEO got what it was $150 something million bonus. So I want to see, because in comparison to the private sector, I'm sure that they can defend that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think so. One of the things we talk about with living wages is capping C-suite and tying it to, so like nobody in the C-suite can make more than 10 times what the average worker makes in their factory. Like, I think that makes sense. They're probably going to get stock options and get around that, but their salary, I don't see, nobody's working 1,000 times harder than me or you or anyone else. I hate it.
No.
Yeah.
Same with sports.
Oh yeah, I'm.
You know, like
don't get me started on professional sports. Go ahead.
The CBC.
Yeah, don't get me started on professional sports either, because there's so much racism and depth behind that whole conversation. It's so deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
True Liberal is angry that the CBC CEO makes 400,000 plus. When we see private sector CEOs making like tens and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The argument.
I mean, if it is a crown corporation, that is tax dollars, and that is, I mean, it is it's fair game to talk about it. But I do think you have to look at what the private sector is making, and they make a factor of the private sector. But yeah.
To be fair, though, I'm not terribly impressed with her. I saw her on interviews, the CBC CEO. I saw her on I'm not terribly impressed with her.
About bonuses this year.
Yeah, and then also they canceled the New Year's Eve celebrations. It's the first time in like 40 years CBC didn't have a New Year's Eve celebration, and they canceled it 2 days before. Boots on the Ground did a thing about it. They did it because they said they couldn't afford it. But you know that all those, like Boots made a really good point. He says all of that stuff is paid for. So even though they've paid all those costs, somehow they thought that canceling it would be cheaper than having to pay all the fines to get out of all the contracts.
Oh, geez.
So what the hell is going on?
Yeah. So now we go, where's the accountability? And that's where you totally get me on board with that, like transparency and accountability.
But do we know what the contract looks like?
No, I don't know anything about it. I don't know.
There might be something in the contract that gives them an out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe. So I don't know.
He makes a fair point, because most contracts, there would be, you'd have to pay for canceling, but they also may have something in that contract that under certain circumstances lets them get out of it, right?
Yeah.
I sure hope they do, because...
And True Liberal, sorry, I apologize again.
No, don't
True
apologize.
Liberal, it's not the fact that they're making $400,000 a year as a CEO for a company that runs across Canada. It's the fact that they got bonuses and they laid people off. That's what pisses me off about the CBC right now. Those bonuses could have paid for those people's wages and kept them on, and fuck the bonuses for the executives.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if they weren't getting bonuses and she was making $400,000, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just arguing on the basis of comparing their salary to private sector. Like, they make peanuts compared to private sector.
Right.
The bonus thing, when they're laying people off, I agree. But that also applies to the private sector. Like,
absolutely.
Well, Shojin was just saying that. If you're pissed about 400,000 and you're not pissed about other CEOs in the private sector, you're wrong.
Absolutely. Or pissed off that where Air Canada laid a bunch of people off, and then they turned around and they gave their executives all a bunch of bonuses. Not just this last year, but the year before, something like that. They do it all the time.
Yeah, that's not cool.
So I don't think crown corporations, I don't know why they aren't more like, and maybe I don't know, but why are they not nonprofit?
Yeah, well, that's it.
And nonprofits historically are making like 30% of the kind of salaries that you get in the private sector and the C-suites.
Well, here in Saskatchewan, as an example, when I first moved here, the Sask Insurance. Well, I can't think of the name of I don't know why I'm blanking out for the Sask Insurance, for auto insurance. They gave money back to everybody in Saskatchewan who had a vehicle registered here because they made money one year.
I heard that from BC too.
Yeah.
What's
SGI.
that?
Thank you. Yeah.
That they had SGI, that they made so much profit that they gave money back to their members who had insurance. Yeah. You're never going to fucking see that in Alberta.
Well, actually, you wouldn't have seen it in BC either before the NDP. The ICBC we had the worst insurance rates across the country, and they were going up every year. And it turned out that the Conservative government in BC had been bleeding money out of ICBC to cover up the fact that they had promised to balance the budget.
Oh my God.
Balancing the budget. So they siphoned money out of ICBC
forcing rates to go up,
raising people's wages. And then they also siphoned money out of our BC Hydro, which is a crown corporation here. So yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
Just like when they raided the EI fund, our insurance that we paid and stole it to put in the budget.
Yeah. So anyway, it was to quote our current premier, who was the attorney general when the NDP came to power. ICBC was a dumpster fire. That was politically, it was so bad. Like we had so much money laundering and corruption and crown corporations that had been robbed of money from Peter to pay Paul, and it was so nasty.
And that was under Conservative government. Now you have NDP.
Yeah, the Conservative government who went out, Gordon Campbell, who was the original leader of the BC Liberal, which are not Liberals, they were Conservatives. He was hired by DOFO. So you can thank Gordon Campbell and the BC Liberal Party for DOFO's policies, because Gordon Campbell was hired by DOFO to consult on how to turn Ontario around. So the same things that were allowed to happen in BC, Gordon Campbell took that dog and pony show on the road to Ontario. And now we see how that played out.
It's fascinating to watch the disconnect about, like, even on healthcare, on housing, and understanding the different levels of government and how lost people are on who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if you're having housing problems, that's primarily the provincial government. And if you have a Conservative provincial government like we do in Alberta, and then people get downright mad that the feds are like, we have to make a difference, we're just going to give the money right to the municipalities, and and then the province gets pissed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how many people are defending their Conservative premier for being upset that he's funding housing. Like, he's funding housing. Why are you so upset about that?
I don't know. Well, guys, it's been lovely chatting with you.
I gotta go too. I gotta feed my dog.
It's late here, less late for you there.
No, not quite. How about you, Jada?
Nice to see you, James. I didn't really get to see your lovely face.
Yeah, I'm in my house coat because I got out of the shower and I didn't feel like getting dressed. So I didn't turn the camera on.
See, we're missing a show, I tell you.
No, I gotta go to bed soon because I gotta get up at 5 o'clock for work.
Oh, God. Yeah, good boy, go to bed. Good night, guys.
All right, bye everyone.
Have a good night. It was great talking with y'all. Thank you.
Ciao.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting